all dreamed of seeing our favourite musicians in the smallest rooms possible, but that's becoming increasingly difficult. Over 35% of music venues in the UK have closed in the past decade due to noise complaints, increasing business rates, and a struggling industry. A quick search sees hundreds of articles detailing the sad reality of the country's once treasured music institutes. From Birmingham's Rainbow to Bristol's Fleets, nowhere is safe. It's not just a modern problem. In 1997, the building that witnessed Madonna's first UK gig and the explosion of Manchester's now iconic music scene shut down. Dave Haslam DJ'd the Hacienda over 500 times and saw its growth, peak and decline.
The club ran out of money, and the main reason we ran out of money was the security bill to pay the doorman and to keep the bad people out just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the club became unsustainable.
The problem didn't stay in the 90s. Late last year, Wakefield's Unity Works went into administration, even after receiving £4 million worth of grants.
We were told that the company shut down due to the amount of financial baggage that it had. When the company first opened in 2014, it was very badly managed by the managerial team back then. Once it was taken over in about 2016, it started to work again, but we only had 750 people standing in the largest room that we had. It wasn't big enough to get bigger acts, which would attract more people to make the money. But the bands that were chosen weren't the best fit with the venues, so we thought that we should have gone for kind of a little bit more known acts, which the head of the live events department kind of didn't.
Closure doesn't just stop gigs from happening, it's also stopping bands from being able to grow. The UK economy gains over £4 billion from the music industry every year, with acts like Radiohead and Liam Gallagher contributing as much as major companies. If there's no small capacity rooms to let acts start out, in 30 years' time there won't be another Bowie or Florence Welch to headline festivals and arenas.
There's so many brilliant music venues in Leeds that closed over the years. We had a venue called the Duchess of York, which is an absolutely legendary venue. Started in 1988, closed in about 2004, 2005, I can't remember exactly when. If you look at the first UK tours, or first proper tours of loads of really influential bands, if you go to like Nirvana, they played the Duchess of York on their first UK tour, Oasis, their first tour, you know, every influential band of the last 30 years would have played at the Duchess. But the developers just got their way. It's Hugo Boss now, and that was absolutely crushing for the live. So it wasn't just all these big bands, but those bands, John insisted a local band played as support, but some local band would have got to support Nirvana. Like, that's just incredible.
You need smaller venues because they don't seem like, especially if it's like 100 people going to a gig, it doesn't seem like it's going to affect the city or the main drag or whatever. But you need that to build it up, and I guess people that work in councils they just see money for a hotel, okay, that does that, and they don't see how much it helps develop a city culturally.
Yeah, especially with like new bands that are starting out, people that actually made the effort to go to like 100 cap rooms makes like that can make or break a gig for a band, you know.
You never know, like the Hydro in Glasgow's how many thousands of people is that?
A lot of people.
And most bands who play in there at some point will have played on Tuckhill Street if they're from Scotland, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, you're gonna have to support it at some level, or you're not gonna have Hydro venues being built. Or
I've seen slaves in King Tut's, and there was like 30 people there or something.
Half of them were our mates.
Yeah, and it's like without them doing that and like doing the small venues and kind of making a big impression on people, maybe, you know, they would be selling it like massive rooms now, because kids would need that to kind of start off, you know.
Despite the UK being at the forefront of music, it's behind in supporting its own scene. Arts Council England chose not to support any new music venues in the next 4 years. It only supported high art, according to the Music Venue Trust Director, Beverly Whittrick. They ignored all requests for comment on this decision. In Europe, this is a different story, with the whole touring culture trying to support those wanting to make it in the music industry. Grants are available to help with the costs, and many venues are subsidised to avoid growing business rates.
Culture towards touring bands is more hospitable. it's a kind of a climate where they take bands more seriously and they treat them, you know, as if they're guests. I mean, a lot of the time in the UK, the expectation is that you turn up, you put your stuff in a corner and you just like get out of the way. And it's always seemed kind of funny to me that you travel like a couple of hours to go and, you know, work somewhere, and you'd get paid in like a crate of beer at like 4 p.m. and just think like, yeah, that's normal. That's like, or you'd go somewhere and you'd get, say, 50 quid for something that's probably costing you about 150 quid just to get there. So yeah, the European thing for us, it's always that they just seem to have a better infrastructure for touring acts, and they take it more seriously. They're much more hospitable. Wherever we've gone, like, you know, Brighton, Bristol, Leeds, further north, further south, the threat is the same for these types of venues, and you see these same people in every city that are completely dedicated to supporting music, do what they do, and probably, you know, if they're lucky, just about break even. If not, they lose some money on it and they just say, oh, well, it's what I love, it's a hobby, basically. But then there is always a point where they can't afford to do it anymore. There's actually very few people that can just say, yeah, whatever, and just throw money down a hole forever, with all the threats of closure, you know, people's business rates being put up, people's like loans being put up, rent being put up, bands having to charge more because they're working on a tighter budget as well. And it's squeezing everybody to the point that a lot of venues will just naturally fall away because they can't afford to do it.
Pressures are coming from everywhere: councils, the economy, and even neighbours. One of the main concerns is noise complaints. Manchester's Antwerp mansion received many, which together with unclear planning permission resulted in its closure last month. This isn't an isolated incident though. Many venues are having to pass on the strict limits onto the musicians.
Yeah, you get restrictions to when you can make noise and when you have to stop making noise.
It's quite bad in Edinburgh.
It's bad in Edinburgh for noise complaints, as in you have to have noise caps, never mind times, like you can't be over a certain decibel, which is, I know it's really bad in Edinburgh, but
Loads of venues are shutting in Edinburgh because of that.
which doesn't make sense because it starts to kill the city as well as.
And it means no scene can happen because there's no venues basically. It's a shame.
Pressures are being felt throughout the music industry. Venues are employers much like any other business, and with every enforcement notice comes redundancy.
A lot of the staff were made redundant on the day and were just told, you're not coming in tomorrow, that's it, which was kind of a big surprise to everybody. So that wasn't handled as well as we thought it should have been. But the fact that one of my colleagues was even pregnant and she just paid for a mortgage for the house, it was all stuff like that we weren't expecting. So yeah, it was a big personal loss.
There's no one campaigning for venue closure, but it's a growing concern with many venues dealing with the problem in secret. Some have managed to successfully petition against decisions, but many haven't had the same luck. Manchester's sound control has been knocked out, ready to be replaced by student accommodation, while Cockpit lies unused in the same state it was in 3 years ago. Manchester City Council declined to comment on individual cases of venue closure. However, Leeds are trying to work with owners to get the best results.
If complaints come in after a licence, a lot of it depends on whether that complaint is in breach of their licence or not. It depends on the nature of the complaint as well. Different complaints go to different places. So, for example, if someone complained that they were refused entry to a bar because of, you know, whatever reason they're accusing the bouncers of, we can call in that licence, and that means that we can get the people that applied the licence, the owners, to come and sit before the committee and answer questions on what's gone wrong. If it's a complaint where, say for example, they've only got a licence to serve alcohol until 1 a.m, if we then get a complaint that they're serving alcohol at 2 a.m, we can call in that licence and review it. We can add on more stringent criteria, we can withdraw the licence. It's really done on a case-by-case basis based on what the complaint is. It's quite rare for a complaint to result in the licence being removed completely. In fact, there's only really one of those I've known in my time as a councillor where it was a venue which was using quite graphic language and quite sexually violent language to try and advertise their club night, and we had them shut down because it was completely unacceptable and just not what we want in our city. Most complaints, which are usually more about the amount of noise coming from a venue or operating hours, would usually result in kind of just a tweaking of some of the conditions to make it kind of better for the people living in the area. So it's quite regularly we'll change conditions, quite rare that we'll just shut a place down.
Change can also be made on a national level. John Speller introduced his Agent of Change Bill into Parliament, which makes whoever is responsible for the change also responsible for managing the impact of the change. So if a hotel moves next door to a venue, the hotel owners are charged with soundproofing. However, this isn't all the government are able to do.
You could have what's called a use class for music venues. So our use classes in this country are quite broad. So you have use class for a shop or a restaurant or a vertical drinking establishment, which is a pub or a bar. You could theoretically have a use class just for live music venues, right? Which then you'd have an argument about whether nightclubs should be or not, but anyway, that could be a bit of a... And then it would be more difficult to get change of use, which would mean put people off the... If you've got a place and it was classified as a live music venue and you couldn't get permission, it was very hard to change it to shop or something else, then it would provide further protection. So there are other things in law we can do in terms of planning law. And maybe, just having a bit more of an onus on the music industry and the importance of these by government. The government can have a strategy around development of the music industry and live music. I think UK Music would like that. I don't see, it's just probably just not a priority for the government. I don't think it's something like they're wildly opposed to. I just don't think it's like on the radar. I mean, people need to recognise the contribution of the music industry to the UK economy. It's more important actually for to have a good music, vibrant music industry than clothing retailers, for instance. So, without those venues, you won't get your Ed Sheerans or your Adeles or whatever, because they won't have anywhere to play it in their careers. And, just those two artists, contribution to the UK economy is probably the same as some of our largest companies a year, in terms of the amount of revenue that comes into the country from their sales globally.
Live music is what spurs the industry forward. It can inspire people to pick up an instrument and try it out for themselves.
A venue can have all kinds of influences which you can never predict when you start, You could write a playlist of cool songs, but you don't know that what you might end up doing is something that affects art or affects society in very crucial ways. The most important club in the world is the one that changes your life, and that is something that happens still now, and it happens everywhere. And what's great about venues is it can happen in really grotty places, and actually often happens in grotty places more than well-appointed, secure, well-organised places, which can sometimes be a little bit dull. So those little backstreet venues, bars, clubs, the ones, behind a railway station or next to a bus station or in a derelict building or just out of town, down a little dark alley, all those kind of venues are places that can change people's lives.
Only 40 people saw the Sex Pistols at Manchester's Lesser Free Trade Hall in June 1976. This included Morrissey and Joy Division, but that show inspired the Buzzcocks to form, who then inspired Nirvana and Arcade Fire. If venues keep on closing, there'll be nowhere left for this to keep happening. Support your local music scene and keep it going for future generations. People will always love music, so we can't let the list of lost venues keep on growing.